So what do we do? How do we get the guitar neck to sound musical to us? And how do we get to see that as a musical instrument, not as a place to play scales? We're gonna need to go further than just playing the caged shapes. You know, when you're improvising, does it ever feel like sometimes you're not really playing the guitar? Or you're not even playing music? Does it ever feel like you're just playing scale shapes? That's how I felt, at least. When I started learning guitar and I got past the calluses and I got past the pesky F bar chord, that was the next thing I needed to deal with was what we call fretboard fluency. You know, guitarists have this extra step that other instruments sometimes don't need to have, which is not only do we need to know what notes sound good and which note we want to play, but it's also, where do I even find those notes? Because if you look at this thing, it can get really confusing. I hear a bunch of teachers say this: just learn all your caged shapes. And that's a good thing to do. Quickly, if you don't know, caged shapes are literally just the 5 places you can play any major scale. And they're kind of named after the shapes of common guitar chords. Now that's again, as I said, it's a necessary thing to do until you realize that it hasn't solved the root problem at all. Like, now I just know 5 scale shapes that I can then get stuck in and still just regurgitate scales, and I'm not really making music still. So it's a way to learn the guitar neck, sure, but to get musical with it, we're gonna need to go further than just playing the caged shapes. So what do we do? How do we get the guitar neck to sound musical to us? And how do we get to see that as a musical instrument, not as a place to play scales? While tonality and harmony and stuff is built off of scales and chords and intervals, really, when you talk about musicality, you're talking about phrases, right? There's a difference between playing bored yet? to there's a difference between getting from scale to getting to actually expressing something, actually having a voice to the playing. It's a phrase, and we learn these phrases from solos, and we hear them in our head at a certain point. What if we were to take a phrase and move it everywhere on the neck and use a phrase as a way to explore the guitar neck rather than a scale shape? This was a big jump from my own growth. I thought, if I like this phrase so much, like for me it was, why don't I learn that thing everywhere? And I started to realize that that's a much more digestible way of breaking down the neck than learning like large 2-octave scale shapes. Now this can be a little bit daunting, just like anything, but chances are you have everything you need. All you need is a knowledge of that one phrase that you're gonna play. You just need to understand it. And then you need to know all of the places where that first note of the phrase happens. So for example, if the phrase starts on C, you wanna find all the different C's on the neck, which nowadays is just a Google search away. We're gonna use a phrase to expand our knowledge of the fretboard, okay? So for today, I wanna demonstrate that for you and break down that process. Today we're gonna be using the lick. And so, not because I wanna be a meme lord, that's not why I'm using it, it's not just for the memes. But it's because chances are a lot of you watching this video have probably heard the lick before, play it jokingly at jam sessions or whatever, or at least have seen that video. Side note, I'm kind of bummed out that it's a meme though, because it's actually a good phrase, so I feel like sometimes when you want to use it, and then it just comes off as a joke, like that's not fun at all. So we're gonna redeem the lick, we're gonna try to take it seriously today, okay? So, the lick. What is the lick? Quick breakdown of the lick. Literally, it's walking up the D minor scale, A minor scale. Normally it's in D, but you can play it in other keys, obviously. So in our case, the most popular version of it is it's in D minor. It walks up the D minor scale up to G. It hits the E and the C going down, forming like a C major triad. And then it lands back on that starting note D again. Usually they'll do a little slide into that E. So that's the lick. The first thing you want to do to move this everywhere is you want to just know all the places where the first note are. So in this case, D, right? So where are all the D's on the neck? Open D, obviously. 3rd fret, 5th fret on the A, 7th fret on the G, 10th fret on both strings, the low and the high, 12th fret there, octave, 15th fret on the B, 17th fret on the A, 19th fret here. And if you have a 22 fret guitar, like an extended range one, then yeah, you could probably hit those. Yeah, we found all the Ds, and now we realize that we can launch that lick from any of those roots. And so here's kind of the main part that I want to share with you guys. The main discovery that I made. I'm sure other people have discovered it before, but the thing that I realized was that you can launch the lick in 2 directions from any root. So the first way is you're starting off by staying on the same string, but you're changing fret, right? So I'm going from the 7th to the 9th to the 10th on the G string. There's your C triad, and then the D. The alternate way is I get that first E, instead of going up a fret, I actually go down a fret, but by jumping strings, I'm actually raising the pitch. So I end up going to the 5th fret of the B string. You see how there are 2 places, either going right or 2 ways to play the same lick from the same root. And so, with a few exceptions, you can do that for any of those Ds that I just talked about. So open position. Obviously you can't, if we had the guitar like lower, if we had more frets down here, or if you were dropped a little bit, maybe you could hit like an E over there, but we don't have that note, so that'll have to do for now. So here it starts to apply where you can see I went to the right or to the left. Works for that root too. That root as well. Now I'm gonna go to the 10th fret here. A little bit of a shift there, but you can still do it. 12th fret. Don't want the G string to ring there. There you go. Now here, again, it's an instrument limitation issue where I can go right, but if I wanted to go left, I don't have another string to jump up to. So that's just one place where that idea won't work. But again, crawling up some more works at the 15th fret of the B string, works there, there, and there. All those D roots, I'm just launching from the left, right, left. Now here, you can see where there's a bit of a limitation here, because I don't have that extra fret. But if you do have, again, like I said earlier, if you have the extended range, you can hit that pretty easily. Okay, there you go. We've kind of exhausted all the different places that we can play that lick. And so what ends up happening is you kind of have an idea of a musical phrase everywhere on the neck. So for example, like if I wanted to play a solo, and I'll just kind of noodle around a little bit, it'll sound a lot more musically cohesive than just going... boring yet, right? So I'll probably mix some scale stuff in, but you'll see it's because I've learned a phrase everywhere that I can actually be musical everywhere. I'm using the same pitches. I'm just not playing the lick verbatim. You can see how already that kind of sounds a lot better than just me going and then just moving here and doing the same exact thing. It's because in playing a phrase, you kind of like feel the architecture of the tension and the resolve. And so you can kind of start to hear some musical variations on that phrase a lot easier than just, I know a scale, and then there's no musical material to work with. Another thing I want to add about this strategy is that this strategy tends to work a little bit better with phrases that have a limited range and a limited complexity, usually maybe like a fifth above and a fifth below. The reason why is, I mean, for example, this like West Montgomery phrase that I really like. Because it starts on a low C and it goes up to the high B, like 2 octaves up, basically, you can launch it a few places, but once you get to this higher area of the neck, I mean, that C just isn't accessible. Although, again, phrases like this can be moved into different places. Not all very practically, but it is still possible. This exercise does a few things. Firstly, it's a great technique thing. Like just all these variations, it trains your fingers to be flexible with a single phrase in a certain way. Secondly, you'll understand the whole neck. You know, like I said, I like to call this middle part of the guitar the dark forest, because everybody knows the G shape in 2 places, but you start to get in the middle and it's like, panic. So by learning phrases in the middle, you're kind of chasing a sound rather than chasing scales and then forcing the scales to sound musical. The phrase will probably sound at least a little bit more musical than the scale. The guitar isn't like a endless dark forest either. Like there are really a few limited places that I can play the lick. It's not really like endless. So the guitar kind of starts to feel a lot more manageable when you've moved a lot of phrases around in this way. It's possible to learn this thing, you know? It's really possible. Thirdly, it makes you a more integrated guitar player. What do I mean by integrated? What I mean is sometimes guitarists, they play based on what their fingers want, not based on what their ears want. So for example, let's say I have this phrase right here, kind of a bluesy, right? Bluesy A minor phrase. So a lot of the times, maybe I only play that phrase here, and I go here, and maybe I'm not as fluent here as I am here. Well, if I like that phrase here, why don't I just move it other places? And so what ends up happening is the musicality you feel in this G shape that everybody loves is now transferred to this E shape, and etc., right? But you see how all of the notes, they lay differently. Those two sound completely different. Now, John Mayer has a pretty cool video about this he did a few years ago. I'm going to post a link to that if I'm able to find it. But basically, when I say integrated guitar player, you won't sound natural in one place and contrived in another. You'll just sound like you everywhere on the neck. Do this enough and you'll start to hear phrases not as fret numbers, but as notes and as a sound and as a feeling. In conclusion, this kind of speaks to my goal as a guitar teacher for my students. Shameless plug, I do teach online. Again, this speaks to my goal for all of my students in person or on YouTube. Doing this exercise means you'll be one step closer to following your ears more so than your fingers, but you'll start to realize that these phrases are findable. The end goal is that guitar fluency is a means to an end. I don't want you to just learn the neck for the sake of learn. Like, nobody was like, the best guitarist in the world, he's the best guitarist because he knows the neck. Like, no. You're the best guitarist, if there even is such a thing, because you made great music, right? It was a means to an end of making the music that you want to hear and that other people want to hear. I don't want the guitar to play you. I don't want your muscle memory and your fingers to play you. I want your ears and your mind and your spirit and your creativity to be in command of this thing. And moving a phrase everywhere is a great way to do that. So if you guys appreciated this video, please be sure to like and subscribe, hit that notification button. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these fretboard fluency. Fretboard fluency? What did I call it? Yeah, fretboard fluency. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these fretboard fluency videos in the future. There's a lot more of these little strategies that I've found just extremely helpful for organizing the neck, organizing my mind, and keeping myself musical when wrangling this whole thing. So take care and happy practicing.